Welcome back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And we are continuing in our series to refresh some of our core values. And the one that we are posting or refreshing today is build relationships. And I think this one actually is it's part of the story of like how we became who we are, right? And it's part of Ford's story.
Yeah, and it's what we want to be. Ironically, going forward, we've talked a lot lately as a team, as a leadership team, saying that we want to get away from -1 jobs, right? Like we've talked about it. So in our numbering system, if it's -1, it means it's the first time we've ever worked with somebody, and there's certainly things that are really good about it. And for a long time in our growth mode, we looked at it and we were like, well, every time we got a -1, that means it's another new client, right? But it's also a whole nother set of parameters and situations and relationships that you have to build that don't have the trust that the other jobs do. And so, it really became this switch where we started out, building relationships and tried to focus on a small number of clients that we serviced and did a really good job and built a strong history with. And then we expanded very quickly and took on a lot of clients and a lot of opportunity in a lot of different markets and grew. And now we've settled back down to say like, okay, let's take a step back and identify people who we work well with, we've had success with, who want Berg to do the job because of what we do, because of who we are and the work we do. And let's focus on getting those jobs. So that's just something that came to mind as we talked about it, in the building relationships piece. I mean, there's obviously a lot more to it than that, but It's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a key piece of it. The other pieces I think being building relationships internally, like amongst our team, making sure that, the more we know each other, the more we relate with and to each other, the better we are as a unit, for sure. And I think the other piece of it is likely, who outside of Berg, our vendors, our suppliers, and Ford said it, I think, even in the original podcast, to some extent, our competitors, right? Understanding that we're not necessarily silos just because that person does the same thing in our market and it bids against us, it doesn't mean that we don't have something to learn from each other.
No, and it's such a big piece, like when I think about today itself, just today with my phone, it was a busy day with a lot of phone calls. And if you went through my phone, you'd see those like 4 distinct sets of relationships, right? You'd see clients that we always work for. You'd see subs and suppliers and people we have relationships with. I talked to a couple of our competitors about jobs that were coming out and what was gonna go on, and some opportunities, and just trying to gauge it. And people who are somewhat competitors who said, "Hey, did you hear this job's coming out?" Right, which you wouldn't think they would normally do, but in also trying to gauge who's bidding it. They also know that, realistically we would find out. So they have no hesitation to tell us because it's an open market. We can all bid and we try and do our best, and then my family has obviously called me a couple times, but it's each of those is relationships. And your phone's an interesting thing. When you look at it, whether it be text or calls, it sort of shows you who you have relationships with. And it's funny to look at it on a daily basis about how many phone calls you might make and who they're to and what the interaction is. And focusing on internally, the relationships, that's a really big piece for us. I sometimes Aaron will say to me, like, why are you going to call Brian at 8:30 at night? And I'm like, well, it could certainly wait till tomorrow, but I'm not actually calling Brian about work. Like I'm calling Brian just to tell him something funny that happened or something funny the girls said, or, a sports experience that he could relate to from your background with the boys. And so there's something more to it. And that helps then when you and I are actually trying to work through a challenge at work. Is that we're trying to work through figuring out what the best choice is and whether we are coming from the same position or coming from different positions trying to work it out. It helps that there's something more than just I see you from X time to X time during the day, and so I think that's big. And we see that in our attempts to get everybody together in our events every couple times a year. And, and it's what we stress when we talk to the guys. It's what we do might not be your favorite thing to do, but coming out, spending a little bit of time with somebody, it might give you that little piece of something that helps when you go to make a phone call to them, that makes it a little more comfortable that you can call them. So I think it's a really important piece of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing about building relationships is it is the human element, right? Um, you very rarely build relationships like sitting by yourself in an office or by not participating. So I think that that's the other component here that I don't, I think is worth talking about is like the building relationships piece. It has been very key to our success, and it happened because people were willing to sort of engage and put themselves out there and be a part of something.
Yeah, and
So,
and it's something. Ford's not here,
right.
but it's something that's funny, because if you know Ford, Ford is not necessarily the guy that's going to go out and want to like shake hands and kiss babies and you know what I mean, meet everybody.
Right.
But it's while that's true, it's also completely untrue.
Yeah.
Like if you are somebody who interacts with Ford, he values you. Just in the fact that he interacts with you means that you're important to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And when he steps onto a site and he shakes your hand, he means it. You know what I mean? And he will want to know about your family and how things are going and what you're going to do because he engages with it, he remembers it, and it values to him. One of the crazy things I remember is I don't think I had worked here more than a year. It may not have even been a year. And I don't remember. We're going back. Now you got to remember there was, 6, 8 employees, but I think it was my birthday, the first year I worked here. So, I'd worked here almost a full year or a year. And Ford bought me a paddleboard. And he took me to Tom's house. I had been to Tom and Carol's once or twice. And he was like, I got you something. And he got me this paddleboard that I still have. Right. And it was because he knows I like to surf and like it was, it was this thing. And it speaks to that, like whether it's, at the Christmas parties when he would go buy hand tools, you know what I mean? Or power tools, you know what I mean? Like Ford really wants to meet you where you are. And I think that comes through in the company. You know what I mean? That's really, I hope it comes through that's what we're trying to do when we set these things up is try and meet people where they are and let them know that we value them as a person, as a friend, as a coworker, just as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, we're going to play that episode now. It was episode number 6, and that was almost 2 years ago, back in November of 2021. And here it comes, building relationships, a refresher on some of our core values. Welcome back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us. We're continuing our series on core values, and today's core value is going to be build relationships. We learn something valuable from every relationship, whether it's a team member, partner, or competitor. We build all relationships on mutual respect and honesty. With me today, Brian is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And we're just going to take some time to unpack this one, give you guys some insight as to how that was developed, what it means to us.
Build relationships, I'll reiterate myself, and that ties to everything else, but relationships in life are most important thing you have. They might not all be good relationships, but relationships are what you have, and especially as the world continues to get more digital and abstract and people behind keyboards, I feel even more strongly about it, especially after the last 16, 17 months that we've had. But building relationships specifically to this business is that building a relationship with your coworker so that you have trust in them, that when you're working with them side by side, it's related to trust, which relates to safety. With your clients, the trust of that they know that you're doing what's in everyone's best interest. And then again, with peers and competitors, I'll tell a story from years ago. There's a company called WK Frame down in Ludwig's Corner area. And we were working on a job, and we ran short on pipe. I think I needed a 3-foot section, a 24-inch. And I didn't want to run all the way back because I just needed this to finish up the job. Well, I stop in there, and the guy goes, "Oh, yeah, I got some out back." I was like, "All right, I need 3 foot. How much do you want?" I mean, I probably would have given him $20 at that point. This was years ago. It's probably worth like $3 because it really helped me out and saved me a lot of time. He goes, "Nah, you take that." He's like, "Someday I might need something, and, you just repay the favor." And that was just such a big experience in my life because in this industry, for the most part, it's not a very collective industry. It's not a very good work together industry. It's, well, I got my piece and you got your piece and you stay over there and I'm going to do over here. And with certain things that has to be done. But at the same time, one of the reasons that in a couple of weeks, some of us are going to go to a peer meeting. Now, it won't be local competitors, but we'll get to learn new ideas from other people in this industry. We'll maybe learn some new ways to do things that we didn't know about. And it's about the learning too. And how do you learn? But usually someone else that already has experience. It's a good way to do this. And so that's where build relationships is so valuable from my perspective.
Well, and I wouldn't have thought this is where I was going to start, but it's the interesting thing that happens in these podcasts is, one of us says something and then the other person in the podcast may react differently in a completely different direction than they thought. And when Ford said that about how it works in our industry, it is something that we really, I think, have to work on as a group, as a team, as individuals, is trying to fix that, to make it that the industry is more of relationship based, is more that you can have an interaction. I can't tell you how many times I've said to everybody who will listen, the people that we bid against directly, there is a limited number of people that own the equipment that the site work companies in Southeast Pennsylvania own. There's an even smaller group of people who are qualified to do the work that needs to be done. So if you have a limited labor force and a limited equipment availability, well, now you've got a sort of what we would call like a high buy-in. There's a floor. You need certain qualifications to get in. So it's one of the things that I really think the industry could improve in as a whole is there's no reason for us to fight amongst ourselves. They are going to build, thousands of buildings and warehouses. They're going to build thousands of houses. They're going to do lots of landfill work. They're going to do lots of stream restorations. All the roads have to be repaved. There is plenty of work. So there doesn't have to be this feeling that there's a struggle, right? Because we all know I love competition. It's one of my things. It's how I like to operate. And Ford had brought it up when we were talking. But I always say, but we don't have a direct competitor. I'm not competing against anyone. I'm just trying to be better than they are because I like to be better. I like to win. I like to succeed. And I think it puts us in the strongest position as a team, which then means as individuals that we can have longevity and we can be here at Berg succeeding for the next 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it is for any of us. And so that's a funny thing to bring up when we're talking about building relationships, that it would be outward facing to what people would view as competitors. But it's how far we really want to take that core value. Because I'm going to expect that everybody in the company should have a relationship with another person in the company, right? They should be able to interact. They should be able to talk, find some common ground, and certainly work together. I'm going to expect that all the outward facing people, so whether it be a foreman, superintendent, project manager, or manager, is going to be able to go out and have relationships with the people they need to facilitate us getting, bidding, being awarded, and completing the work we need to. But I want to go one step further and expect that there is no reason to create any animosity or any issues between any of the people that would say they're in the same field as we are, because the work is there. We're all capable of doing it. Let's just work together as a team to do our work, and everybody else can work together as a team and they can do their work. And the two don't have to butt heads. They don't have to make it harder. So that's one point. And then the other point that I want to make sure I hit on before I sort of see what anybody else has to say if I trigger anything is I think building relationships is one of the most important things in life. If you can successfully build relationships, have good interpersonal skills, it enables you to be able to be comfortable in most situations and to be able to interact. I would go so far as to say succeed, but that's just a view of mine of how I view the world. But it's how we go out into the world and are comfortable and then are able to be successful is because we're able to go out and we're able to interact with people and find some common ground and build a relationship and then use that relationship to make our lives and their lives better. And so that's really what building relationships means to me in a big scale, but also in our core values.
Well, now jump back to the three of us sitting in this room. before we worked together, we had relationships outside of this business, and then we were able to work together later. But in the beginnings of the company, people that worked here were relationships, friends, family, whatever it is. And now, as we've grown, people bring their friends to work here. That's through a relationship again. Um, all of those factors tie back together into this one's, it's a two word description, but it is so much more than just those two words.
Yeah. So the word relationships is funny, right? Because relationship talks about the way things connect. So how do these things connect? And I think what both of you are saying in different ways, and me, I can be super analytical at times and get way into the weeds on stuff. But ultimately, that's what we're all saying is, how do we connect to these things? How do we connect to our people? How do we connect to our competitors? How do we connect to the dirt world? Right? We talked about going to other places and seeing how other people do stuff, um, and I think the one thing that is really interesting about what you just said there, Ford, is like those connections at some point have led us to different opportunities, different places of interaction, especially when it comes to some of the folks inside of our organization. Right now, like relationships don't always come that easy, so we've been able to capitalize on some easy connections, some easy relationship. But I think one of the things we got to remember is, like, relationships just take maintenance. So it's hard to have that connection to something if you don't put that effort in. So there is some reciprocity to a relationship, right? And that goes along with what you were saying, Dan, in regards to safety, and we've got to trust each other. But you don't trust somebody typically unless you build some level of comfort with who they are and what they stand for and what they do. But to do that, you got to actually be willing to interact with them, and so there's like there's some layers here that we got to get through, and ultimately, that's why it's called building relationships, because relationships don't just exist. It's not, I don't have a connection to the farmer down the street unless I've made some effort to figure out, how to interact with him and buy his produce, or whatever the case may be. So, in order to build those relationships, we have to be willing to kind of get outside of our own shells and experience the things that are happening around us, the people, the competitors, the rest of our industry, and really beyond our industry, take those things too. And how do we capitalize on strengthening those connections? So,
Well, it's funny that you took the word connections, right? Because one of the things Ford and I always said is we're old and getting older. Technology continues to make us feel older. But we always pictured, like, if you look like CSI or one of those shows and they make this web of people and they put little pins on the board and everybody's got a picture. And we would always talk about it, that's one of the ways that Ford and I both operate, is we try and identify, like, okay, what does this group look like? Like, if I had all these people identified, is one person relevant to the other person? And then there might be a third person that I don't know, but I do know these two other people. It's what became LinkedIn, if you really use LinkedIn. And so, Ford had said with technology and with the past 18 months and everything with COVID, but the other thing that has made the world get smaller is that you continue to build relationships. So the more relationships you build, the more connections you have. The more connections you have, the more you realize how connected everything really is.
You're going all Kevin Bacon on us.
I am. It's like 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. But the funniest example here is, and Ford made a joke about it, and he may even realize that I might say it, is Jerry Gorski. People would just assume Gorski's a connection because they do a lot of engineering work in our area. They're in Montgomery, Chester County. Makes sense. They've been in Morgantown. They engineer stuff and they don't build it. We build stuff and we don't engineer it. Perfect. We probably just ran into each other. We got introduced to Jerry Gorski because I was unfortunate enough to get selected for jury duty. And on jury duty, I mean, what are you going to do? You're just sitting there waiting to get picked. And so I, in being me, I brought prints with me and was just reviewing prints while I was just waiting. And then Jerry asked me what I was up to. So then I talked to Jerry and realized Jerry had an engineering company. So it's just an example of that. Like you can always be building a relationship. I mean, at jury duty, you're just sitting at jury duty, but there's always an opportunity to make a connection and build a relationship that you really have no idea what that relationship might yield. You're not necessarily doing it to gain something, to capitalize on something, or to get something. You're just building a relationship. But if you build enough relationships, and if we all do it as a team, then there'll be things available like Frame giving us a piece of pipe, like, a GC calling us because they need help with something that's not exactly in our scope, but they know we can take care of it. It's all about building those little pieces so you can be available when somebody needs help and also be available to help somebody else.
I feel like I'm sitting in a corner here because this is all the stuff that is low on my personal list sometimes, but it's just the reality of it. We've been burnt by it too. There's no disagreeing that, we really go out of our way to help a customer, and then the next job, they don't choose us to do that job. And sometimes it burns a little bit because you think you've helped out to build a strong relationship, and maybe that relationship isn't what you thought it was going to be. But if we just have to keep doing that, like, to somebody new, that's how Scott did one job for a client, did a great job, helped them out, and all of a sudden now he's doing 12 more jobs for that client on that particular level. High construction, we've done multiple jobs for them now. And we like referral business more than any other kind of business. It has lower cost of acquisition. It has an ability to already have some trust built in because we have a relationship with that customer, tying it all back together again. And I think internally, relationships, sometimes people like, oh, you got to go hang out with that person on the weekends and do stuff. And that's not what we're speaking in this type of relationship here. Like with your coworkers, I might not have a lot in common with someone, but we have what we're doing right then, at least in common as a bare minimum. And you can build upon that. It doesn't mean that your families are going to go on vacation together, but it means that you can have trust in them when you're doing what you're doing, that they are supporting you and are doing things that will make sure that you all go home safely at night.
Yeah. So two things that you said there. So just kind of go backwards a little bit. You talked about relationships that don't work out, right? And why are those relationships important too?
Well, I think they're important because we can't foresee the future. We're not future fortune tellers per se. And maybe that relationship didn't work out, but maybe there was someone there that at that company, and everyone in all industries, people, I think I heard a stat the other day that people have 17 jobs in their working life. It used to be like 2 back in the day, but as the world has changed, it changes more. But maybe there was somebody there that didn't have the choice to choose you, but the next time they went to work for somebody else and they called because they liked working with you. So you don't know where that might be. And the secondary thing is that I guess it's just part of human nature that like you keep putting those positive things out there as that's who you are. And sometimes they get taken advantage of, and that's disappointing. But, getting burnt and turning it off that closing that door is never a good idea.
Yeah, it sounds like a therapy session.
I know. Where's the couch?
Yeah, Brian's on the couch. So what's funny about that, what you said in your question, Brian, right, is what's important about the ones that fail, the times it doesn't work, the time when you go out on a limb and it doesn't work, either the client, person, employee, it doesn't work out. You don't reach the end you want, right? But nobody said it was going to be easy to build relationships. Like you said, it's work. You got a successful relationship is something you work at. And so if everyone was successful, then it almost undermines the whole sense of what work is. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Like it rings it back, and I don't think I mentioned it before. I know we've talked about it. We were pulling weeds, and Charlotte thought my daughter thought it was going to be entertaining to pull weeds because she just thought I liked to do it. Like in other words, so work is not necessarily entertaining. Building relationships is not necessarily entertaining. It can be rewarding when you get to the end and you succeed and you have a finished product, something you can see. And that's the good side of it. And relationships are the same way. It's not going to be that every time you try and build a relationship, it's going to be successful. But that doesn't take away from the successful relationships that you build. It actually makes you value them more, because we might have tried to, interact with 6 new clients, and only 3 or 4 of them did it work where we got a job. And maybe only 2 of those 6 did we develop into repeat clients. But you were never going to get those 2 if you didn't try to get 4. And if you didn't try with 6, like, that's how the statistics work. That's when we start to get to the very Brian analytical side. Like, we know what the numbers are. We know that based on industry data, you need to put this amount of bids out. We can do that math. So you got to be willing to put yourself out there as an individual and as a team and try and build a relationship, even knowing that everyone's not going to be successful.
Yeah, and something else, so to go back to the second thing I was thinking of there for while we were talking was, the expectation isn't necessarily that everyone's buddies, right? I mean, sure, it'd be great if we'd all be friends and we'd all go on family vacations together. I mean, I don't know what we would do for those 5 or 10 days, but as a company, but it'd be great though. I mean, if all of our guys, all of our staff were that close, right? But that's not the reality. But something in this that I think was intentional with how this core value was developed is approaching relationships, approaching these connections with mutual respect. And how do you personally, you guys, get to a spot where you sort of keep that at the center of it, where, maybe I don't already have a connection, maybe I don't already have a relationship, but if I can approach this with mutual respect, make an open mind, how is there room to build on each scenario?
Yeah, I'll go first, and then Ford will follow up. We'll go the opposite the way I normally tend to go. Is it's so important that you find common ground. Like, I do think interpersonal skills are somewhere where I'm strong, and JD comes to mind that he's brought up a few times that I can get JD calmed down when he's really upset with me about something. But you got to find common ground. Like, you got to identify. It really doesn't matter if you like X and I like Y, and it could be 24 of the 26 things that we do not like the same thing. But if there's 2 things we do like the same thing, or we do agree, or we do see it the same, or we do have the same interests, as long as we focus on those 2, those other things really weren't relevant to our relationship in where our relationship is. We don't have to agree on all the things. So I think that's really where the mutual respect and the mutual interaction occurs, is that you have to be able to, as an individual, identify, where you have some common ground. And at work, it's really easy because you got one to start with. We're all at work. We're all here by choice because we could all be doing something else, working in the dirt world, and whether it's, Brian, who's furthest probably from running equipment, and then I'm less, I'm closer than you are, but nowhere near where Ford is. Given the chance, all of us is going to go play in equipment if somebody leaves it around here and says, hey, we need somebody to push this off. It's going to be varying degrees of ridiculous with us doing it, but we all would like to play in it. Just like, all of my friends' kids who are, little kids and 5 to 10 years old, and every one of those boys, if I left them in a thing with a machine running, they would jump in it and probably injure themselves, but they would want to, So you've got a common thing. So that's a great starting place with anybody. If we're talking internal, peers, employees, is you've already got something in common. You have the same likely work experience and the same desire to get things done and be successful. Nobody's in this field and doesn't want to succeed.
That's a great point. We don't have to start at zero, right?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, is the joke of this is that there is already something, a very large common thing. You're going to spend 8 to 10 hours doing something X, I don't care what it is, with this person. And then it's just watching their interactions and trying to, how they act during that time will probably show you a lot about that person. And it just kind of becomes reciprocal and grows from there. It doesn't matter. Yes, of course, if you have a long-term relationship with someone you worked with them for years, you might have inside jokes. You might have some of that conversation and stuff. But when a new person joins a team, they want to be here. You're already here. Part of that is trying to bring them in, because that helps everyone out instead of, trying to keep them on the outside, because yeah, they might not get some of the conversations you're having because you have an ongoing conversation about something, but at the same time, looking to try and find out maybe they do have something to say about that conversation. But if you at least give them that time to chat, and it might be in the morning when you're setting up your equipment or when your foreman's talking about a job, and you can, or it's the stickers on their vehicle or their hard hat or their lunchbox. So you're like, hey, they like to fish, I like to fish. And this is not, again, like you said, to go crazy and, get into going on vacation or going hunting together or any of those kind of factors. This is just about the mutual respect so that you can get the job done. It's a trust factor, and it all ties back together to building those relationships, at least if we're specifically speaking within the company or within your team. And then the other things we're talking about is more outward facing.
And you know what's funny, Ford, is, and I bring this up and I have to go back for my best example. I have to go back to somebody who's not with us anymore. And he was just a great operator. I'm not going to call him out, but he could actually run 2 to 3 pieces of equipment simultaneously. It was unbelievable, most unbelievable thing I ever saw. Very efficient. But I genuinely liked him. He knew what he was doing. He was super knowledgeable. But one of his strongest things really was his his interpersonal skills with employees, but even more so with clients and inspectors. And the one I remember is Ken Cavanaugh. Ken Cavanaugh can be a tough inspector to deal with. He's a PennDOT inspector. Ken wants things done correctly. He wants them done the way the plan calls for, or as he sees fit to adjust them based on need. He does a great job. I have no issues with Ken. But we walked into a meeting when I was new to this industry at that point, and the guy sort of warned me. He was like, listen, Ken's here. We want to avoid confrontation. This isn't real complicated, but these plans are not clear. I said, okay. I said, I'll stay out of your way. So the owner immediately took a very confrontational stance with Ken. Ken was basically not going to let him do anything. And our employee talked Ken off the ledge, brought reason to the table, gave him a solution, and were able to get the project moving forward. The only reason that happened was because he had a long-standing relationship that he had worked on multiple projects with Ken successfully. Because he took the time to, I don't know if they have anything in common. I don't know if they both hunt or fish or go to the beach. I don't know. But what I do know is they both had in common the belief that they wanted to do the job correctly and get it done and get a successful project together. And he used that to facilitate the project moving forward, whereas the owner almost got his own project blocked.
Sounds like mutual respect.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a great place to wrap up. So, hey, thanks for listening, folks. We hope that you come back again as we continue this series to dive into our core values here at Berg Construction.